Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Kajansky, and I work on the alumni team at McMaster. My portfolio includes trying to keep alumni and friends like you connected to and proud of the university. Our team has been working hard to continue to do that while keeping in mind the constraints that a pandemic necessarily imposes. Every year, we organize a group of McMaster alumni and friends to get on a bus in Hamilton, and we drive down the highway to Niagara-on-the-Lake for the day. First, we enjoy a decadent lunch while listening to an entertaining and informative talk, and then we go on to the Festival Theatre to watch a matinee performance of one of the Shaw Festival's always excellent productions. Things are different this year, but we at McMaster alumni were determined to keep some theater in our lives, and so, along with the professionals at the Shaw, we have found a way to bring the theater to you. There are two silver linings that I can think of to this situation. Number one, you can participate no matter where you are. And two, while we are normally in the seats enjoying the magic created for the stage, this year we get to peek behind the curtain and meet some of the incredible professionals that create that magic. Before I go, I just want to give you a heads up that you'll receive a survey to your inbox about the talk today. We love when people respond and appreciate the feedback. Also, you'll be able to ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We encourage you to add the questions sooner rather than later. And finally, I'm pleased to introduce you to Suzanne Merriam, who is a Senior Manager of Education at the Shaw Festival. She'll introduce her colleagues and facilitate the questions and conversation today. Enjoy.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you, Chris, so much for inviting the Shaw Festival. And thank you, everyone, for making time to join us today. Welcome to the Shaw Festival. As Chris said, my name is Suzanne Merriam, and I work at the Shaw as the Senior Manager Education. And today it is my great privilege and honor to be your online conversation host. You know, I've worked at the Shaw Festival now for about 12 seasons. And I've often heard actors say that a costume provides the last puzzle piece towards the development of their characters. So a costume can often tell an actor how their character might move or might not move. If their character has a cape that they can swish, or a hat they can doff, or maybe it's a corset that constrains them. You know, as an audience member, costumes for me can immediately set me in a specific time period, sometimes a specific location. It can communicate to me a character's social standing. Sometimes costumes are used for comic and tragic effects. Now, keeping in mind, at the Shaw Festival, we are a repertory theater company. So that means we produce up to 13 productions in our season. And our season lasts from April to December. So it goes without saying that the amazing costumes at the Shaw Festival, all the work that goes into that to build the costumes, maintain them, build and maintain the hats, all the shoes, all the accessories, are really the work of one of the most incredibly talented teams at the Shaw Festival. So to allow me, please, to introduce two of my amazing colleagues, Jason Bendig, who is head of Shaw Wardrobe, and Margaret Molokach, who is head of Shaw Wardrobe Running. Welcome, Jason.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hello, Margaret. Good to see you.
Nice to be here.
I so miss seeing you guys in the building. We've all been working from home since mid-March. Yeah. So thank you so much for making time for this conversation and allowing us to learn about your passions and your jobs. So Jason, I'm going to begin with you. Okay. You are the head of wardrobe at the Shaw Festival. So can you share with us what that role entails?
For me, my job is to oversee and facilitate a production wardrobe of about 50 people. We are responsible for the creation of costumes for roughly 15 productions a year. And in 2019, that was over 600 costumes.
Whoa.
Yeah. I don't do it alone. Working with me, I have Janet Ellis, who is my associate head of wardrobe, as well as a seasonal coordinator, a wardrobe assistant. And often I have one or two interns that help me throughout the year. In an average season, I have 3 women's cutting teams and 3 men's tailoring teams. Cutters and tailors are the people who draft the patterns and cut the cloth. They oversee the making of garments with their first hand, who is usually a senior stitcher, who both sews and assists them in fittings. And in the supervising of their teams made up of 2 or 3 stitchers. We also have staff that specializes in footwear, accessories, millinery, and not to be forgotten, our dyer and textile artist who is responsible for dyeing fabric before we make things, but also breaking it down after it's made into costumes and we're seeing it on stage. When working on a production, I also work with designers in understanding their interpretation, the style or flavor they envision for a show. We discuss their sketches so I can communicate their vision and be a resource to them to create costumes that give flavor and meaning to characters. I interpret designers' sketches into actual piece lists, shop for fabric, and oversee a costume basically from the sketched page to the stage. I assign workloads and oversee fittings, creating all the paperwork that supports a production, from dresser sheets to costume plots, to the initial flow, which is used by wardrobe running, and also by stage management. It's all of this information: sketches, fabric samples, shoe lists, hat lists, progress photos, finished costume photos, every detail we collect, and I keep it in what we reference as a costume Bible. It's all the information for one show, and sometimes it's several books, often 2 or 3. It'll serve as a reference should we need to buy or replace something while a show is running, or if we were to remount the production again. On average, we have 2 or 3 fittings that I oversee per look or per costume. And for an average show at the Shaw, we take a build of about 7 to 8 weeks. They grow or change depending on the size of them, and also on the scheduling. When that scheduling happens, we overlap with 3 or 4 other productions at the same time. And at the end of a build, once things are cut and fit, we assemble and put everything on a rack, which was lovingly known as Rack Day, where we count everything off and hand off all the dresser sheets and the initial costume flow to the dressers for technical rehearsals. During technical rehearsals, I collect notes on costumes that may need adjustments, and make sure that the person who is best suited to perform the note, whatever the adjustment is necessary, is the one to do it. And then we return the costumes to Margaret and her team of dressers. Notes can be given to me during technical rehearsals from directors or designers, actors, or by a dresser. Sometimes even a technical thing like a sound person will ask for an adjustment to a costume. I assist in the troubleshooting or problem solving of costumes before and after they hit the stage, and oversee them being filed away into storage once a production is finished.
And so when do you sleep, Mr. Bendig?
I like to sleep. Actually, I sleep very well most days.
You do.
As I said, I don't do it alone.
About what you do, that's just making me feel exhausted. My God, Jason. So there was a few things that you mentioned there that I'd like to explore a little further, but I really want to now just ask that the very same question to Margaret. So Margaret, you're a head of wardrobe running. This is a term that might not be familiar to all of us. So can you describe what is the department, wardrobe running, and then what is your role as the head of wardrobe running?
Sure. Well, wardrobe running is the other wardrobe department that when Jason sleeps, we're awake.
That's true.
Basically, we are responsible for the wardrobe, the costumes, during the running of the show, thus the name wardrobe running. So it goes from production wardrobe, where they construct things, to us that run the shows. And I work with a much smaller team than Jason, usually only on a contractual basis, 11 to 15 people. And then we have casual laborers that come in pretty much daily to assist with maintenance of costumes. There's a lot of pressing and laundry and things that happen in the morning. So like Jason says, once they have finished creating the costumes, they do rack them and they send them down to my department. And the ladies assigned to the particular show will go through them. Ladies, I shouldn't say ladies, sometimes we have gentlemen on the crew as well. And they will go through the costumes piece by piece. And for a show, this could be tens of thousands of pieces, because they account for every earring, every shoelace, every bit of trim, or everything that's on the costumes, just to make sure all the bits and pieces are there. And we go through everything, make sure we're familiar with it. Usually on bigger shows, we will have a meeting before we get to the dress rehearsal period with Jason and the designer, just to go through the flow chart that has been created, so that we understand the progress of the costumes throughout the entire show. And often in larger shows, costumes get reused. So while you're going through the flow chart, you have to note when a costume will make a reappearance. So this might mean running a costume backstage to another location so an actor can get into it. Or there have been times we've had to do a quick press job on it during the show, just so it looks good again when it appears the second time. So we will get the costumes, and we will prep the dressing rooms for the actors so that when they come in, their costumes are ready. We preset or get things ready backstage for any quick changes that have to happen. And we assist the actors so that they don't have to think about their costumes. I believe that if the actor has to go on worrying about where his next change is going to be or how it's going to happen, then we haven't done our job. So we are there just to help them be able to focus on their characterization and their role on stage. When we get into running of the shows, we look after the maintenance of the costume. And that means that post-show, at the end of the show, we launder or repair or get things ready for repair for the next day that might have to be done. There's sometimes damage happens or wear, and we just have to keep the costumes looking good and true to the designer's vision, so that if whether there's 30 or 130 performances in a season, if you saw that performance the first day that we did a public performance, if you come back for the 100th show, you shouldn't see any change in the costumes if we've done our job correctly. So we're there to maintain the designer's vision. And once the show's over, like I said, we get things ready, we do laundry, we pull repairs and whatnot. And then in the morning, we come in and we'll do pressing, folding, repairs again. If there are more, we'll do a costume check. And it's just a cycle, and we go through it all again. At the end of a show's run, then we will prepare the costumes for storage. So this might mean, again, special laundering, removing bits and pieces, because quite often things that wouldn't normally be sewn to costumes or clothing are sewn on a costume, so that you don't have to worry about putting on a special brooch or adjusting a sash. It's already attached. So we will remove bits and pieces, launder, send it off to the dry cleaners, do any repairs, darken labels, anything we can do so that it's ready to go into the main wardrobe storage, where Jason's people then will take it and file it away for possible use in future years down the road, or just to become a showpiece and come out for displays now and then. There are unfortunately a lot of costumes that will never see the light of day again because they're very specific to a show, but then there are many, especially in menswear, that may have been on stage for 10 seasons. And I have to say that things are built so well. We tend to use like traditional tailoring techniques and really good quality fabrics so that things will survive a season. Because when you're wearing a costume on stage for a performance, it would be like you having a sweater in your closet that you wore every day for 7 years. By the end of the season, the costumes would look like that if we didn't try to maintain them to keep their appearance fresh and as vivid as they were from the first day.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. So I'm seeing and hearing that you are aptly named Wardrobe Running. Sounds to me like you're running a lot.
We do, and we don't bother with gym memberships usually during our open season.
That's very wise. So this question is really for both of you because we're curious about the process of how a costume moves from a designer's vision through the build and then passed over to Margaret and Backstage. So if we could follow the process of a costume, how does it get built? Then what happens to it when it's Backstage?
Sure. I guess I'll start. Generally, I start off with a conversation with a designer on an average show about 6 months roughly ahead of a dress rehearsal. So we're looking at a 6-month window. And that's generally after they've met and talked through what their vision is with a director, and they have an understanding of where they're headed. In the case of a musical, sometimes it's not just talking through with the director, but it's a musical director and a choreographer. Sometimes the sound designer too, depending on what's going on. It will have an influence. And as I say that, I'm leaving out lighting. So also lighting designers. Fun fact, when we were working on Holiday Inn, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, because of the size and the scale of that show, we actually started not 6 months, but 1.5 years in advance. So we just expanded what we normally would do and went way, way ahead.
And why was that, Jason?
It was the scale of the production. On the outlay, that production, when I always read through and digest, and with the designers go through bits and pieces. And Holiday Inn in particularly had the possibility of being well over 300 costumes in one show by itself. And that's a bit daunting.
I just want to add something there, Jason, because when Jason says over 300 costumes, he means 300 looks. Probably that 300 costume means 30,000 pieces. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So once we have that digest or have had that first conversation, I will ask for a preview document. And this is where I'm going to ask Dave to throw the first document scan up there. And it's an inspiration document. It's generally around the six week mark. We've both read details and kind of gone through, and it's really a vibe. Sometimes it can be a sketch. Sometimes it could be a painting or a mug shot. It really is where designers are finding their inspiration. On what a role is or what an era is. In this case, this is from Holiday Inn. This was for Valentine's Day. And this was an inspiration preview that Judith Bowden had provided me.
So can we just say that Holiday Inn was our Christmas musical production at our festival theater last year. And the storyline is that this inn celebrates all the celebrations throughout the year. So it celebrates New Year's Day, it celebrates Valentine's, it celebrates Thanksgiving, so all of these holidays are incorporated into the musical, which I think is why you're saying there's so many looks and so many costume pieces with the looks. Sorry, Jason, I jumped in there. Go ahead.
Perfect. With the designer, we look at the structure of the play and the scenes, and we record that in a chart form, and that's the beginning of our costume plot. And as you were just saying there, Suzanne, on Holiday Inn, it was a massive undertaking. So this was just one inspiration page. We had literally, I think, on that show there were 100 different inspiration pages that I received. It's a lot. So moving along, once we get that, I generally will go and start to ask a series of questions. In the case of musicals, you know, who are these characters, and what do they do, and what are they about? And you know, in the case of a musical, on ensemble numbers, who's partnering with who, and what style of dancing? Are they singing? When are they not singing? Sometimes when are they not singing is actually more important, because generally that means they're moving something, and that'll be a piece of scenery, it'll be furniture, you name it, they'll be helping.
So Jason, may I ask, so that image we're also seeing, that's an example of what that Bible might look like, that you were describing to us earlier?
Yeah, well, this image that's up right now, generally around the 16-week mark, I asked for a preliminary costume sketch, and usually it's an uncolored sketch. I don't have one of those per se, but I wanted to show this little book, which is actually our travel Bible, which we do when we go shopping. And on major musicals, I'll have 2, sometimes 3, as many as 4 books. One usually for female leads, one for male leads, one for female chorus, one for male chorus. But it gives you an idea of the scale and what we're looking for and the numbers of fabrics. And in this case, when you find a really great fabric, it informs the dress. So, you know, we were looking at all those beautiful old vintage Valentines, and we found this fabric, and we kept questioning ourselves, is it too much? Is it too much? And the thing about Holiday Inn was, it was a series of production numbers that were meant to be production numbers. So it gave us a little bit more license to push into variety hour and to push, I hesitate to say the word tacky, but it was a little bit more evolved and a little more out there than we normally would be. It pushed our taste level a little more extreme.
Okay.
You know, and we look at things on these characters like what are some of their visual attributes, like what's their social status, and the doctor and a maid. For these dresses, it was all about how they moved and how they danced. And an interesting thing was, in a budget saving measure, we actually bought dresses and redressed on top of them for this number. So under all of these dresses, they're all ivory underneath. And then we built with tulle and this very beautiful embroidered fabric, these gorgeous pink ballroom style dresses. We're emulating, starting to get into the new look, which was coming into the 50s, because we were sort of 1947 here. You know, once we get through all of that, we get into the details, which I will look into the third slide there, Dave. Magic. And it's when the fabric really does the talking. You know, we've got that heart sort of beautiful, overly ornate fabric doing all the talking and showing us, you know, all this lusciousness of Valentine's Day. And it just, and that was a progress photo. So that was sort of in progress, being made. We wouldn't have actually been there in production yet, but what I'm gonna backtrack a little bit here and go about the 20th week. Usually I get finished sketches, and then we move on to making and fittings and that sort of thing. But it just allows you to see how much goes into those. So the next one is actually the finished sketch in full color. If I get Dave to, oh, we went straight to the end. That's okay. Oh, there's one in between there, Dave. There's a number 4. Okay, so we'll go to number 5. That's fine. So we get to see the dress in action, which, is all about how they moved. And one of the reasons we actually, not just budgetary wise, but what we wanted is this dress to look this way for the whole run. And there's sometimes you want that polyester under there. And what these dresses allowed us to do was have that buoyancy, because not only did they dance beautifully in them, but there was also a comedy element to this number, where these girls, as the tempo of the music picks up, start to crash into one another, and comedy ensues as this is happening, in sort of just a collision of pink. And we wanted those dresses to come out the other side and rebound and look great every night. So it gives you just one little glimpse of what goes into making a dress go from the page to a finished garment, and what a big part the fabric actually plays in the making of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That was amazing. Thank you. That really helped, having those visuals to see the progress. So it's got to that point where you and your team built those amazing costumes, and then they get handed over to Margaret.
Yeah.
Their
And in doing that handover, I was going to say, we've created this document, which is the flow, which we've talked about a little bit, and it takes all the information that's on a dresser sheet for each person in each scene, and then we hand it off and say, "Here, Margaret, what do you think? This is what we think this show looks like," and she takes it from there.
Right. Yes. So then you get the costumes in this flow chart, Margaret. Take it from there. Then what happens?
And then we go and we cry in a corner. No, no, actually, Holiday Inn was challenging, and there were many, many changes. And usually the way the show worked was every time there was a scene with one or two of the principals, the entire remaining cast members, all of them were backstage changing into something. So we were constantly moving, trying to get people clothed. The backstage setup, I think probably 80% of the costumes were backstage, sort of strategically placed or piled in chairs and in quick change booths for quick change, because the scenes were very short and the actors often didn't have time to make it back to their dressing rooms to change. So it takes a little bit of planning, and the dressers and myself will go through the flow chart that Jason's handed down, and often with an assistant stage manager as well, who has been with the actors in the rehearsal hall. And we go change by change and make sure we know exactly where everyone's going to be, that we haven't sort of double booked a change area in the wings, in the backstage area, and to make sure that we actually do have time to get the changes done. There are some situations where, while the dressers are assigned to certain dressing rooms, they may be changing other actors from other dressing rooms throughout the show. It just depends on who is closest and who can help. And there were some changes that were so big. There were 2 dressers on the actor at once, plus a wig person, plus maybe an audio person, and perhaps a props person standing nearby to hand off props. So in these small areas backstage, which are very dark, we have very low lighting, usually a very soft blue light. The three to 6 of us are crammed into a space that's not much bigger than a bathroom stall. And we try to get an actor dressed and ready to go. And sometimes you've got 2 or 3 actors in that space that the 3 or 4 of you are trying to get ready to send out in time for the next entrance. So it's challenging and it's a lot of fun, but by the end, we're all having a great time, no one's stressing anymore, and you've got time for a coffee and a sandwich between your changes. But it keeps us moving. And things like that Valentine's Day number that Jason was talking about, when the comedy section sort of ensued with the actresses banging into each other and crashing and falling on each other, the dressers would be watching from the wings with their eagle eyes, trying to make sure that nothing got damaged or torn. And actually it did happen several times where someone's heel got stuck in someone else's chiffon or tulle or lace, and things did tear away, and we would have to try to catch that before the next show. So we try to keep an eye not only on what we're setting up backstage, but what's going on stage, so that we're prepared if something goes wrong, that we can make it right if the costume has to reappear or catch it for the next performance.
Right. So you said something there. What you mentioned a dresser. So what's the difference between a wardrobe runner and a dresser?
There's actually no difference. Dressers, wardrobe runners, wardrobe mistresses, wardrobe attendants are all pretty much the same people. It just depends on what theater you're at. And different countries use different terminology, different theaters use different terminology, but more or less we all do the same thing. We look after the costumes backstage and their upkeep. So.
Amazing, amazing. I have another question for Margaret now that I'm still speaking with you. So you have a very close relationship with the actors. I mean, you were describing that space backstage where you're in close proximity in the dark. You can't speak because sometimes the actors are still singing, supporting the singing going on stage. So can you share with us about that relationship that you have as a dresser or as a wardrobe runner and the actors?
Yes, it becomes a very close and intimate relationship, because you are, of course, seeing the actors in states of undress and when they're vulnerable. And if they're having a bad show, you're there to sort of help them calm down and refocus and things like that. And if you're fortunate, you've worked with the ensemble member in a previous production, so you've already established some sort of relationship with them. And our job is not to interfere, and you don't make comments or offer suggestions about the performance or anything like that backstage. You're just there to help them get ready. If they need something and you're able, you run and get it. I had one actor in a show where he had a bad throat, and he was going on for a scene where he actually didn't sing, but the leading lady sang downstage center, and he circled around her as she sang. And he said, I wish I had a lozenge. And I had time. So I ran back to his dressing room, got him a lozenge. And then I crawled upstage. That means the back of the stage, really low to the ground. And when he walked around, I just stuck my hand up so he could snatch that lozenge out of my hand and pop it in his mouth. And he went on. By the time she finished her song, he had sucked on the lozenge, his throat felt better, and he was able to do his next number. So you just sort of, sometimes you go a bit above and beyond, and most actors are very kind, and they don't ask you to do things that are really unreasonable. But it's, you know, the saying, the show must go on, is really the motto backstage. And if there's something you can do to assist the actor to get out there, so the audience is nonetheless aware or not aware of what's going on backstage, or that there's a problem, then you've done your job correctly.
Thank you, Margaret. And you just prompted me to ask Jason a question about how the show must go on. So Jason, you know, things happen, actors are ill, they can't go on, and often an understudy is arranged to go on in their place. So it must, like, what if the understudy doesn't fit the costume of the person who's ill, or for whatever reason they can't make their show? What happens then?
We in a perfect world, we're ready for an understudy, which means that we know who that person is, and we've known probably by the time it's opened, and we've prepared a whole separate rack just for understudies, and understudies might not get every detail that the original performer did, but and often we have to look at what's being dictated. You know, do they have to have a certain shirt that buttons a certain way? Does a jacket open and close a certain way? Because the other thing is, when we start to change that stuff, not only for the performer, because the performer just changed, but also for the dressers, resetting and adjusting some of that stuff is also a new learning curve. And we have to be aware of how much we're changing a format for someone.
Right.
And often in that situation too, the understudy is already in the production. So then Jason and I work really closely here. We're basically on call 24/7, because we will get a call from a stage manager on a day off saying, so-and-so's sick, his understudy might have to go on tomorrow. So we sort of liaise about what do we have, what do we need. And if they're already in the production, there are times where they will do their role, bits of their role, as well as the role they're understudying. So then we have to figure out what pieces of their costume can they use for the other role. And there's a lot of back and forth, and we just have to remap the traffic pattern of their costume pieces so that they're there for the new parts the actor will be doing, as well as their normal track.
Yeah, NASA called, they need you.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do have some questions from our guests who have joined us today. So I'm just going to move to those questions. Christina asks, where are the costumes stored when the shows come down every year? Jason, can you let us know that?
Yeah, we have a warehouse out in Virgil, which we share with props and scenery. It's a massive warehouse. We are approaching, I think, over 20,000 costumes stored. And every year we go and put things away after shows come back and get ready the next season to pull them all out again if we need them. So yeah, we have this massive warehouse, which is exactly what you think. It's rows upon rows of costumes hanging or in boxes or on shelves.
Yeah, I've been at that warehouse. It's truly magical, that place. It's gorgeous. It's really beautiful. I know you think it's messy, but it's magical to me. Another question by Alexander: do any of the actors ask for and receive a costume they've worn in a play? Margaret, can you respond to that?
Some do, and sometimes if it's something we know that will never appear, and I usually contact Jason and say, okay, so-and-so would like this particular piece, can we give it to them, or usually we try to sell it to them for a nominal fee. And if it's something that's very unusual that we know will never appear again, then quite often we let it go. If it's something like a gray flannel suit that we know we could use in future seasons, usually we don't sell those, we hang on to them. And then unfortunately, sometimes you have actors that help themselves to little pieces. Usually it's just a little souvenir and bits and accessories and things, which drives us crazy. But and if any actors are watching this, you know who you are. But at the same time, yeah, so some things do go off to an actor. Some things we hang on to because we know they'll be useful for future productions.
Thank you. Jason, is there anything to add to that, or did Margaret, she got it all?
I think she pretty much got it all. The most common request is shoes, yes. Actually. Yes. Which it really depends on what they are. If they're a very specialty dance shoe or if they're a contemporary shoe of right now. But
right. So sticking with you, Jason, another question. So how did you begin your career?
Oh, well, the easy answer is started when I was a child. I started to sew when I was very, very little. My great-grandmother was the first person who asked me to thread a needle and actually put a sewing needle in my hand. And that was great because she was just inspirational. She had been a dressmaker and a seamstress, and she let me go through all of her little bits of fabric, because we all keep those things, the button stash and just all these little gorgeous bits. And I think that really let me create and be inspired. And then subsequently from that, I had really great teachers who supported me along the way, who really said, yeah, you can do this. You can do something with this gift that I've been given. So. Yeah.
Great story, Jason. That's an amazing story. Margaret, how did you get into becoming the head of wardrobe running?
Well, funny enough, I actually began acting more than doing wardrobe. And for many years I did, small theater and things like that. But I was also very interested in the arts and in specifically fashion design. So I studied to be a formal tailor. And that was my background. And I studied stitchery and pattern drafting and draping and things like that. And when I came out of school, well, I was trying to work for designers, and someone mentioned that a theme park was looking for tailors for their costumes. So I went off to work at this theme park and ended up running their entertainment wardrobe. And one of the actors that I was working with there, he said, "I'm going to see this place, the Shaw Festival. So do you want to come down and check it out?" And so I thought, well, you know, I'm curious to see what their wardrobe was like, because I was working in the wardrobe at the theme park. And I went down and met with the head of wardrobe at the time, the person who had Jason's position. And she said, "Well, gee, we actually, you know, we could use a few people. Are you available?" And I said, "Well, why not?" It was off season because the theme park, I had a couple months off. So I went in to sew for a couple months, and then, you know, I never left. And that was about 32 years ago. So I've been here for a long time. And eventually I went from production wardrobe to dressing, and took over running the department about just over a decade ago.
Wow. And we're lucky to have you both. We're so lucky to have you both. Margaret, I'm going to stick with you for a minute with this question. So how much laundering on a daily basis is actually possible to ensure that there's drying as well?
Oh, well, you always have to launder after the show. There are some things that do not get cleaned every show, and some things that get dry cleaned every 15 or 16 shows, depending on the performance schedule. So on a large show, for example, Holiday Inn, we did 8 loads of laundry, 8 large loads of laundry after every show. And every morning we pressed approximately 60 shirts and steamed probably the equal number of dresses and trousers and things like that as well. On a smaller show, it might only be a light load and a dark load. But our washing machines do get a good workout on the bigger shows. But on average, I'd say for your average show, 4 to 5 loads every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. We've got a question from Nina, who's joining us from London, England. And Nina asks, wondering whether you work with theater companies abroad or in other parts of Canada. Jason, do you work with other theater companies?
Before I was at Shaw, I've worked in a few different places, but we do primarily, well, I was just gonna say, we do co-productions. So there are co-productions. Crows was the one that immediately came to mind this last little while, which is based in Toronto, so local-ish. We do rentals and that sort of thing with different theaters around, and that's primarily Canada, but sometimes in the US. Yeah, myself personally, because of my commitment to Shaw, I don't really get to leave. There just isn't time, but
full time.
yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Like Jason, because my contract is very long, I'm lucky if I get 2 months off of the year, and that's usually in the winter months. I don't take many contracts with theaters abroad, but I do have contacts in theaters, actually mainly in London, England, for information. Sometimes I will call and say, "We're having this problem. Do you guys ever come up against this, and what do you do?" So, and I do that as well with theater companies in Canada. And I think it's good to make a connection with other people in the industry so that you can compare notes and try to get helpful tips from them when you're up against something. And oftentimes, if you're doing your production that you know was mounted at a theater elsewhere, and you aren't quite sure how they overcame, say, this person goes from this scene to this scene, and we're not sure exactly how to do that. What did you do? So.
Oh, that's lovely. I didn't know, Margaret. I didn't know you did that. That's wonderful. Yeah. So Margaret, can you answer a question Danielle is asking about giving an example when you mentioned earlier you might be working with the sound or you might be working with lighting technicians backstage. So when would they be involved in giving input into the costume?
Oh, I think that was more Jason, but things like, for example, audio, it's because many actresses wear their microphones under a wig, which is under a hat. So it could make a difference as to the angle the hat is worn, because it can affect the way the audio is, the microphone's picking up the sound. Or, for example, in lighting, I'm sure Jason can go on more about how the lighting affects the color of the fabrics. But again, in Holiday Inn, this is a perfect show that Jason's used as an example, because we had costume pieces that actually lit up on all the ensemble members. And so I had to work a lot with the on-deck lighting technician to make sure those things functioned and that they were safe for the actors to wear and whatnot. So he would do a check with those costume pieces every show to make sure that they were functioning. And then we would, if we had to alter them to be more comfortable for an actor, I would always have to check in with him that, you know, if I do this adjustment, is it going to affect the electronic or the lighting connection in it or things like that. So the departments at the theater are always working really closely, and also with props too, the properties department, because you never know what an actor is going to have to stick inside a costume or under a costume. So every department really works as one team, because I can't think of any show where you haven't had some sort of interaction with another department as to how something appears on stage or how it behaves on stage.
Nice. Jason, can you add in anything from your perspective when you're building a costume? How do lighting and sound and props come into play with your job?
Well, well, I'm going to speak to a few things there. So the Margaret mentioned that, you know, fabric, we often look at the color of fabric and the finish of fabrics, and how they change when lit, because certain fabrics absorb color and other fabrics reflect color. And sometimes that you have to be aware in very light scenes or very dark scenes what you're using and what's actually going to happen, because you can cause actors to disappear or to show up when you want them to be in the background. So it works both ways. In the way of cross-departmental, Margaret should be, I'm going to call her a hero right now. But all I have to say is tap mics. So in Holiday Inn, there were a couple leading actors who wore tap mics. And not only a tap mic is a microphone that is beside the tap on the shoe or in close proximity so that they can elevate the sound of the tapping.
It's right in the shoe?
It's beside the tap of the shoe, so it's reasonably close. It's usually, you have to snake it down their leg, and it's either on the shoe or in the laces, depending on what they're doing. But we had to figure this out not only for one of our male actors, but one of our female actors. And the trick was that the mic line couldn't show in all of her other previous costumes. And we had to do a real evolution of where and when we could actually fit that mic line in, because it's not that it's uncomfortable to wear, but it's annoying to have this line running down your leg. And when we could actually do that and then get rid of it. So yeah, it took a bit of an evolution and a few holes in pantyhose consistently throughout the entire run. So thank you, Margaret.
Amazing, Jason. That is truly amazing. Margaret, I have a question for you. One of our patrons wants to know, do you have a sewing machine in one of those bathroom stalls? So one of those quick change areas?
No, actually, the dressers, there's no room for anything. Usually in one of the quick change areas, if you're lucky, you have a couple chairs and maybe a coat tree and mirrors and a laundry basket, and that's about it. And everybody just sort of fits in closely, and quite often people are working over people. So someone might be bending down to do something up while someone's working on, you know, the wig person, the wig mistress is working on the hair and attaching a hat above you. So it becomes quite a dance backstage where you choreograph the quick changes so that everybody who needs to be in that small space at the same time can all fit. And as for a sewing machine or anything like that, if anything goes wrong, the dressers usually travel with a little apron or a pouch or a fanny pack that has, you know, a pair of scissors. And even though we run with scissors, we're careful and we always have them in a sheath. And we have maybe a few sewing needles and a couple safety pins and a few other things like that for emergencies. So if anything happens, we can stitch something up. But I've had quick changes where a zipper is broken, and in a 30-second quick change, you actually sew the actor into the costume, and then you meet them when they exit the stage, so you can cut them out and they can go on with their next costume change. So it's, you know, or you have a pair of pliers. I had an actor whose zipper got stuck, and we had to use a pair of pliers to get his fly zipper down. And you know, or you'd be shocked at the things that can go wrong. But you know, it's one of those things with experience, you're ready for any eventuality, and you end up with little things in your little pouch or your apron that people would say, why would you have that? And you think, oh, because there was this one time, and you don't want to repeat the problem. So we get very creative with what we can do with very little backstage.
Absolutely. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you. So a question, Jason, for you. How soon before the season opens are the costumes ready? Because Kamala has noticed that the season's programs will have actors in costumes.
Not always, are almost never ahead of time, is the answer. It's a pretty rare occasion that by the time that publication where the programs are being assembled, we have everything. They do hold specific slots and slide photos in at the last second. So they have done that. But primarily we're putting together looks way, you know, months in advance, with a hope that we're close.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So a couple of questions about the costumes and sharing them or renting them. Does the Shaw Festival share with other theater companies here in Canada or in North America? And or do you rent them to the general public, like for Halloween? Apparently the Guthrie Theater in Minnesota does a rental of costumes. So does the Shaw do anything similar?
The Shaw does not rent to the general public. We will rent to schools, depending on the nature of the production. But we absolutely rent to theater companies, production companies that do TV and film. We actually do a lot of rentals to TV and film right now. Mostly because we have stock from a certain time period that fit contemporary bodies. So.
Yep, thank you. And do we share with other theater companies?
Yes. We have a reciprocal renting agreement with Stratford. So we use their stock, they use our stock. But across Canada and into the US, we do arranged rentals.
Thank you. Thank you. So I just have a final question for both of you. So what has been your favorite show in terms of costumes? And then the second part to that question is, what shows inspire you? So it's a dual question. Jason, can you start?
You always love your first, but my first was really simple at the Shaw, which was St. Joan, which was not everyone's cup of tea because it was so straightforward. But for me, it's always the first one you remember. So I have an affinity to St. Joan. We work on so many lovely things, though. I also really enjoyed working on Grand Hotel because it was the 1920s and had some of my favorite pieces that we've ever done, mostly in women's wear, but there were a couple of really great men's suits in that too.
And is there a show that inspires you? I guess what is there one you want to work on for costumes? Oh,
that's a big list, Suzanne Merriam. I have to say I would be really. I'd like to work on another. Margaret's gonna cringe slightly, but on a ragtime, I think. I'd like to do ragtime. I personally haven't done a ragtime, but I like that time period. I also like the multiple time period and the way that it's done. I like the music, so.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Margaret, has there been a favorite show for you for costumes?
There's been a couple of them. I mean, Mac and Mabel, which happened here at the Shaw several years ago, was a lot of fun and kind of interesting and challenging because it was about film, an old filmmaker. There were scenes where the scene would start out in black and white, and the actors would run off stage, do a quick change into the same costume in color, and then appear in color on stage. So it was like you're watching a film that went from black and white to color. But I think one of my favorites was My Fair Lady, that was designed by Judith Bowden, because there were some gorgeous pieces in it. The fabrics were fantastic, and some really creative twists on what would be your typical, My Fair Lady Cockney English costuming. And some of the gowns were gorgeous, and especially the ascot scene, which was it was very out of the ordinary. It's not what you expect, and I love that. So I think that was one of my favorites.
Nice. And is there a show that inspires you? Is there a show that you would love to work on because of the costumes?
Like Jason says, there are so many, but I would love to give Holiday Inn another kick at the can. Jason's probably falling over in shock right now, but that was such a fun show, and it really was challenging and really interesting because you go through so many different times or periods or seasons throughout the year. You never kind of went from one boring suit to another suit. Everything was different and fresh and interesting, and I think because I think for us, for the size of the show, we did put it together in record time. And I think to do it again and take your time with it, it could be even more spectacular than it was.
Absolutely. I have no idea how it could be more spectacular. And I just want to say, for anyone who was not able to see Holiday Inn, I truly hope Margaret's wish comes true and we produce that show again, because it was spectacular. And I have to say that oftentimes, and this rarely happens at the Shaw, but it was done on purpose, I was focusing so much on the costumes that sometimes I even missed what the actors were saying. But that was done on purpose because it was a Hollywood couple putting on Hollywood shows, right, and the costumes were to be spectacular, and they were. Every show, the costumes are spectacular. And I want to thank you both for your passion and your expertise and your experiences in sharing that with us today. And we want to thank the McMaster Alumni Association for inviting the Shaw Festival to be part of your series. We really enjoyed this conversation and your questions, and we hope to see you at the Shaw very, very soon, my friends. Until then, please take good care of yourselves and be kind to one another. Thank you all. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thanks, McMaster.